Sup guys, gonna look over the comments on the Vanguard tier list video and respond to any questions or criticisms. This won't be the last time I look over the comments, so if you still have anything you want to ask after this, you can do so and I'll get around to it in the next response video. Starting off, we have a comment about Watarase, perhaps deserving of A tier, and they also said that they use Hyuga to proc the barrage 6 times per minute. There is a slight problem in that you're using Hyuga to make the most out of her, so you're losing quite a lot in that flagship position, but I mean, there's a chance. When looking at the damage ships that I put in A, she would have to be able to match Shimakaze, Ibuki, or the DDGs in damage. There are also Kronstadt and Bayard who are both much tankier than her, while likely doing as much if not more damage. It's possible for her to make it into A tier, but she would have to show that she can deal much more damage than Kron and Bayard to compensate for her lack of bulk. The next comment brings up Nubian and draws a comparison between her debuff and Helena. I think there's probably a misconception here about what Nubian does. She only increases the enemy's damage taken from herself, not all sources. So this is only an RNG and temporary weak self buff, not at all comparable to Helena. I believe the wording in the data mine was a little bit ambiguous at the start. Same with Albion's debuff, but yeah, it's not what you think it is. Next up is a comment about the cute tier. Honestly, there are a lot more cute ships than just the ones I listed here, but I increased my standards so there wouldn't be too much clutter. For me though, I don't think Noshiro and Birmingham would be at the front of the waitlist. Maybe St. Louis, Tallinn, and Regensburg. And then there is another comment about Florette, but I did not fully order the cute tier because it was too much of a hassle, so I do like the ones on the first row a little bit more, but rest of it is just randomly ordered. Next comment is about Wakatsuki and Z23 retrofit. Wakatsuki is pretty good, but outclassed by Hatsuzuki in every way except for anti-submarine. Since Hatsuzuki was the cutoff, Wakatsuki was left off. As for Z23, I'm going to have to strongly disagree. When it comes to oil cost, there is Phoenix who costs the same amount of oil and is more reliable and easier to obtain. There are also the DDGs, all of whom cost the same amount of oil as Z23 with roughly the same strengths as Z23, but about double the performance. How easy a ship is to obtain should not be factored in at this point because you can just open the metal or guild shop and get instant access to better ships for all your fleets. There are also multiple of these invitational letters per year that allow you to choose better ships for free. I also don't quite understand this point about her torpedo stat, since both Ayanami and Javelin eclipse her in that department, and both of them are also more useful overall post-unique augments. Before considering Z23, there are many other options more worth mentioning, even just in the same faction, such as Otto, Z46, and Z47. And finally, I just remembered now, but the title does say from an endgame perspective, so oil cost is not a factor whatsoever. Next is a comment about Shimakaze. Like I said, I haven't played manual in a year, so I'm not taking that into consideration here. Next, there's a question about Baltimore. She is a great choice for a themed fleet, but her own stats are a bit too low by modern standards. It doesn't help that Kearsarge is super core and not buffed by Baltimore, so she has at most buffing only 2 ships in any serious fleet. Next is a comment about Drake. I already addressed it in the video, but I set the cutoff at about Carl and Azuma for large and heavy cruisers, and Drake is just slightly below that. While I don't consider investment cost at all for this tier list, I think I'm doing many people a favor by leaving her off and discouraging them from going for her. If you like her, she's obviously far from unusable, and I often use ships that are not on the tier list. Next up is Suzuki. She's weaker than Wakatsuki, who herself did not make the cutoff. Next up is Mainz. I would say that Mainz peaked around PR4 when she got her face sim, and was the epitome of a light cruiser stat stick. It's been 3 years since then, so of course new ships with even better stats have taken her place. There are better stat sticks than her who did not make the cut, including the aforementioned Drake, who outclasses her both in damage and survivability. Bayard is the modern version of Mainz and outclasses her by about 50% on the damage side and 20% on the survivability side. Even within B tier, Scylla and Harpin outdamage her while bringing more utility, and idle Noshiro has around the same amount of damage output, while being one of the best torpedo buffers in the game. Mainz is more so trading blows with the likes of Kuibyshev and Helena meta. Next up is a question about Bristol. She's unreliable on auto, so there's no chance for her. On manual, I've always just preferred running a glass cannon torpedo vanguard instead, which is in my opinion the biggest advantage of playing manual over auto. Napoli where? Sam, I can't believe you had to expose yourself not actually watching the video like this. And then we have a comment which asks, I would also include non-statistics into statistics tier list. If you need a statistic, are you going to ignore unused Plymouth? No, right? Even without her battleship buff, her damage is solid. Good point. I just wanted to emphasize which ship offer pretty much nothing other than their stats. Although there are ships that maybe rely on their utility even more than Plymouth here, such as Aurora, Emden, Marseillaise, Voroshilov, and so on. So I wouldn't take that division too seriously. Next up is a comment about Unzen and Shimakaze. Like I said, even though Shima has the potential, her high speed makes her behavior way too unreliable in auto when compared to Unzen. Next up is a comment about Wichita meta being used in short fights and not campaign. I'll have to test her, but I feel like she would be able to remain in that red HP zone longer in campaign where she makes her money. Next up, we have a comment which just says Aurora should be a B tier. Not true, baby, you just made it up. And then we finally have the last comment for this video, which is about Alfred. And yeah, she just has mediocre stats with a poorly timed debuff and nothing else really. In terms of damage, survivability, utility, nothing at all stands out. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this video. If there's any questions you have, don't be shy and ask away. As long as you ask in a curious and respectful tone, I won't meme on you too hard, and I also welcome disagreements with good arguments as well. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.